With something as popular as the horror genre, one thing will remain consistent. There will be piles of garbage, but amongst those are rare gems. The same can be said for the analog horror genre. Of course, you have your diamonds, you have your minerals, then whatever the hell this is. But recently, I've come across something quite incredible, something that isn't predictable, something new. Dreams of an Insomniac is an analog horror series created by Canadian YouTuber Zachary Gignac, also known as Pastra. He is an up-and-coming horror-centered YouTuber that primarily produces video essays on things like Five Nights at Freddy's. I first started watching his content because of his unique thumbnails that caught my attention. Something about them creeped me out in an endearing way. Then I joined his Discord server in hopes of finding out who his thumbnail artist was, which I later found out was him. I ever since have been a massive fan of his content and video essays in general. Then one fateful afternoon, a teaser dropped on his channel for an analog horror series that was going to feature his 6 characters that were a species known as the Veldigun. At first, I was skeptical about his ability to make horror. His art style looked terrifying, but I have seen far too many awful analog horror videos to take the medium seriously anymore. But the more I learned, the less skeptical I became and the more excited I became for the series. After weeks, the video finally premiered on Halloween. And what I got was far greater than I anticipated. And this is the part of the video where I get into heavy spoiler territory. I highly suggest you watch the video. It's free, it's on YouTube, you'd be supporting a small creator that puts a ton of effort into their work. There's no reason you shouldn't. Without further ado, let's begin. The world of Dreams of an Insomniac takes place in Eastridge County, Canada, somewhere in the 1980s. The county, however, is haunted by eldritch nightmares that hunt in pairs and terrorize the residents. These creatures range from 15-foot demon-like creatures to a 4-foot mouse-like abomination? The video in question, Volume 0 Haunted Halloween PSA, focuses on Clyde, a horned orange beast. Clyde is also the mascot of Pastra's channel, if you don't know. The video starts with the stage being set, who the character, you, the viewer, are. Somebody named Tommy who stumbled across these old tapes in their house. So Tommy boots it up on their old CRT and begins watching. The tape is allegedly corrupted and haunted. The tape begins with a news report and talks about a robbery at a shop called Grimzo's, which, if you don't know, is a reference to one of Pastra's old scrapped characters. You learn that no money was even stolen or anything else that was valuable, just a Halloween costume. The video then cuts to a broadcast. The broadcast in question talks about 6 missing children on Halloween night. Eyewitnesses describe a tall, lanky creature in a Halloween costume and a big ol' horn-to-horn smile to top this horrific Sunday. We then cut to some creepy security footage of Grimzo's, and then a close-up of the creature's face. We are then told that the residents refer to the creature as the Eastridge Demon. Then the footage cuts to what I can only presume to be a report, where the calm voice of the reporter is replaced by a robotic and monotone text-to-speech. We learn the creature attacks by getting into your mind and causing you to have delusions of both sound and sight, and touching the creature has a horrific side effect, which include but aren't limited to loss of skin pigment, mass loss of fat and muscle, bleeding from orifices, infusion of skin and bone. Have fun sleeping tonight. We also learn that the creature is very aware and highly intelligent. We then cut to some strange footage to what I presume to be an old movie of some sort. If you know what the footage is, please let me know. I'd love to know. We then cut to a PSA of a company called the Lankman Foundation. The PSA goes over tips and rules of how to stay safe from the creature. The footage then goes off the rails as it progressively becomes more and more off-putting until you're met at a climax where you're face-to-face with the creature itself. As images of the victims in the creature's face and the music begins to intensify, then the video comes to an end. I'll break down each part that I liked and I think were genuinely scary. At the broadcast at the beginning, I feel like it does a great job at feeling like a legitimate, authentic broadcast. Though some people argue that the acting from the witnesses is too cheesy, I agree, but I feel like it adds and makes the experience a little more comedic. Which I don't think necessarily kills the tone at all, as we're only building up and not really killing anything. Also, I'd like to add that I love the orange filter over the tape. Orange is an amazing color that is very underutilized. In the section where it goes over the children that are missing, I liked the utilization of AI-generated images. They do a good job at being efficient while also being unsettling and feeling off. I think it's about time to address the massive elephant in the room. Well, at least for me. The absolutely stellar soundtrack. The soundtrack is composed by Lyra Horrors on YouTube, a small creator who's incredibly talented. She's also working on a horror game called Analogue, which I think you should definitely look into. Anywho, the soundtrack is schmackin', each one being wonderful in its own way. I'm surprised that someone so talented isn't as recognized in the horror community. The first track, Eastridge Demon, is the track that first plays when you see the creature's face. The track has a strangely nostalgic yet genuinely haunting sound that gives me chills every time. Then the second half begins to play. A tense tune that does an outstanding job at escalating and gives you a feeling that something is slowly walking closer to you. You can't run away. You can hardly think. All you can think about is the abomination that is slowly drawing closer to you by the second, rearing its ugly face closer and closer. You can feel almost as the devil himself is grabbed onto you. Almost like a drowning sensation and... What was I talking about again? Anyway, the next track is an absolute jam. Rules of the Season. It feels like a love letter to an old spooky tune with a hint of elevator music thrown into the mix. It actually is a really good listen. I especially love the saxophone playing. It adds so much groove to it. A certified hood classic. The final track is a theme of the whole series, appropriately named Dreams of an Insomniac. I like how it feels like something Danny Elfman would compose. And it makes clear inspiration to Batman and definitely has the gothic energy to it. I can only imagine what she's cooking up for the next episode. Okay, after putting a whole page worth of script to the soundtrack, let's talk about the scariest part, the effects of a Veldigun. In the section where the robotic voice is describing the effects of contact, it briefly mentions the psychological aspect. The fact that the creature makes you perceive reality in a completely different way is more terrifying than people give it credit for. That ability alone is some existential Lovecraftian stuff that I can't get enough of. When the robotic voice finally gets to what happens when you touch the dang thing, it cuts off by Lyra's insane soundtrack blasting. The tense music blaring over the disturbing visuals. Where I find the most horror in horror isn't necessarily the creepy jump scares or the scary monsters. Usually, the concepts themselves and the less that is known about them that scares me the most. The fact that we do not know what these creatures are, where they came from, or anything of the sort. All we know is the effects they have on humans. It really gets into your head. Even on rewatch, I still catch myself looking behind me, as irrational and ridiculous as it sounds. Next, I'd like to talk about the segment after this, the rules of the season. It's a nice break from all the chaos, yet you still are on the edge of your seat as you have seen what the video can already do, leading you to watch the video in bated breath. I absolutely adore the illustrations in the sketch that really let Pastra's style shine through here. There is also the aforementioned song that works in the charm of this section's favor. But it doesn't last long because the video slowly starts deteriorating when the Video stops on rule 3. You do not hear the knocking at your windows. Where it pauses at a shot of a window for 10 painstaking seconds. Then you hear knocking. When you wear headphones, the horror of this section is amplified because it feels like it's right next to you. And finally, the smiling snatcher standing right before you, staring as his theme starts to begin to swell and your heart begins to race. The images of the victims, the children, Officer Kruger's shriveled face, the creature's face, all of it's flashing, overlapping each other, over and over and over. You hear the screaming of presumably the beast that stands before you, like the cry of a jackal or hyena before it attacks. It all feels like the tension is at a climax. All pandemonium is set loose. The end is nigh for you. Everything you've built up is truly only to burn in the most horrifying way imaginable, and worst of all... Oh, I did that thing again. Anyway... Dreams of an Insomniac feels like an underrated gem that needs to be recognized by more people. It's genuinely sad that nobody knows about the video and it only has 80k views. I want that number to soar. I want to see these creators grow. Their works should be noticed among the masses. So much talent poured into these works, and yet people pay attention to the poppy playtimes and the hello neighbors. Shameless cash grabs with no passion. Though these pieces of media do have talented people working on them, the people in charge, however, not so much. But that's besides the point. If these creators who grew up with and love the horror community begin to have more popularity than what we currently have, then I think the horror community would come back to its former glory. But then, again, 'tis only a dream of an insomniac! Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side of the sewer. See ya!